So, of course, we start at Marvel Stadium with the Saints up against Melbourne. The Demons had this game won for the first 3 quarters. However, St Kilda in the final term absolutely blitzed the Demons, kicking 9 goals to zip and stealing this game to death, courtesy of Nasiah Miller kicking a goal on the siren to win by 6 points. 96 to the Saints, 90 to the D's. Now, we'll get to the injury concern from this game, which was Lance Collard. Injured his foot in the latter stages of the opening term, and he was subbed out soon after. Now, getting to the game itself, and what a start for the Demons. Despite conceding the opening goal of the game, they were able to string 6 goals in succession throughout the first quarter, and their pressure was the most evident throughout the entirety of the opening term. Now, St Kilda did get a goal late to reduce the margin, but at quarter time, Melbourne's lethal work in front of goal saw them lead by 25 points at the first break. And they didn't let up in the second term as they kicked the first 3 goals of the quarter, and they were out by 43 points. But St Kilda did well to kick the final 2 goals of the half to only face a 30-point deficit heading into the major break. Now, both teams traded goals early in the third quarter before Melbourne again tried to break away. They kicked 3 of the next 4 goals and pushed their lead by over 40 points. Now, neither team could kick a goal in the last 10 minutes of the quarter, and at 3-quarter time, Melbourne led by a very comfortable 46 points. And to be honest, there was not much hope for St Kilda. However, they came from the clouds to make this game an absolute showstopper in the final quarter. The Saints kicked 9 goals to 0 to come from 46 points down at 3-quarter time to have Nasiah Miller have the kick on his boot in the final moments, and with his kick going straight, they won St Kilda by a goal in what was one of the best quarters you would see from a player. So St Kilda, I mean, it's hard to say well done. Where were they for the first 3 quarters? They were absolutely smashed. But, I mean, they kept on fighting. I don't know what they have to do with Nasiah Miller. Give him a blank check. Stuff giving Harley Reid $2 million a year. Give this guy the $2 million. What a performance in that final quarter from him. And overall, he was just a great player. So well done. And Melbourne, 3 quarters of great footy, and then they just stopped in the final term. That was terrible from Melbourne. They had this game won at 3-quarter time, and the fact that they just stopped and let St Kilda run all over them, I mean, you'd have to say it's pretty embarrassing. So, well done to St Kilda. Melbourne only have themselves to blame after that. But for now, let's move to the statistics of this game, of course, on the multiple goal kickers for the Saints. Miller and Higgins with the 4, Sharman with the 2. For Melbourne, 3 goals to Fritsch, 2 goals to Melksham, Lindsay and Chandler. On the disposals for the Saints, 34 to Miller, 32 to Sinclair, 26 to Jones, 24 to McRae and 22 to Winhager. And for Melbourne, Rivers 25, Oliver and Viney with the 23, Salem with the 22 and Petrarca with the 21. And finally on the AFL fantasy front for St Kilda, Miller with the 147, Sinclair 125, 94 to McRae, 90 to Clark and 88 to Marshall. And for Melbourne, 134 to Viney, 123 to Gawn, 107 to Rivers, 98 to Oliver and 87 to Christian Salem. Now before we get to the votes for this game, of course we have to mention the members vote for round 19. How the members vote works for you guys. For the review in 2025, a 3-2-1 voting system is awarded for every single game of the AFL season on the channel. And each round, players who receive 3 votes in the game have a chance to get a bonus vote. I will decide the 4 best players from the round who will enter a poll exclusive for channel members to vote on, and the winner of that poll will receive the bonus vote for the round, the members vote. And at the end of the 2025 AFL season, every vote counts. So this is your chance to have your say on the 3rd ever Boundary Riders medalist. So if that appeals to you, or if you just want to show some extra support on the channel, then make sure to click the channel membership link down below and join in the fun. But for now, let's get back into the video. And the members vote for round 19 went to Star Swan Isaac Heaney. But for now, let's get to the votes for this game. 3 votes to Nasiah Miller, 2 votes Max Gawn, and the 1 vote to Jack Viney. So next up, of course, we get to Richmond against Collingwood. 2 big Victorian rivals, but Collingwood, of course, being the more experienced and better side, ran out winners in the end by 36 points. 57 to the Tigers, 93 to the Pies. Now we'll get to the injury concern from this game, which was Lachie Sullivan, who suffered an injury to his knee in the 3rd term, and unfortunately he was subbed out of the game soon after. But getting to the game itself, it was a pretty strong start from both sides. Richmond definitely showed early that they were up for the fight, and it was goal for the early proceedings of the contest. However, the Magpies' domination in field position made it tough for the Tigers to score. However, a late goal for Richmond saw them only be down by 8 points at quarter time. And when the Tigers kicked the first goal of the second term, they were within a point of the Magpies. However, with Collingwood finishing with the last 3 goals of the first half, they were able to take a pretty comfortable 20-point lead into the major break. But Richmond wouldn't lie down. They kicked the first 2 goals of the second half to be back within 8 points. But again, the stronger, older bodies of Collingwood did come to the fore in the later stages of the third term. They did get 1 goal in pretty quick response after the Tigers got the first 2. But with 4 goals in a row in the latter stages of the third quarter to make it 5 in a row was the biggest indication yet that the Tigers were well and truly out of reach of the Pies. However, Richmond did finish with the final goal of the third term to reduce the margin to 35 points at the last change. Heading into the final term, not really a lot changed. The Pies kind of put the cue in the rack, but credit to the Tigers, they didn't let this lead blow out to a massive margin. It was a really well fought out contest from the young Tigers in the end, but the Pies jumped back into the top spot on the ladder and have got much bigger fish to fry as the season continues. And the Tigers, very well done from them to not finish bottom. They've won some really big games throughout the season, but they were never really a chance here. But for now, let's move to the statistics of this game, of course. On the multiple goal kickers for the Tigers, Steely Green and Houghton with the 2. For Collingwood, Nick Dacos with 3, 2 goals to Membry, Myercheck and Will Hoskin-Elliott. On the disposals for Richmond, Hopper with 33, Sonsie with 28, 25 to Short and Vlosten, 24 to Ross. And for Collingwood, Nick Dacos with 42, Josh Dacos 30, Mitchell 29, Sidebottom 24 and Long with the 23. And finally on the AFL fantasy front for Richmond, Sonsie 111, Vlosten 106, Hopper 103, 99 to Short and 80 to Ross. And for Collingwood, Nick Dacos 146, Mitchell 111, Josh Dacos 103, 99 to Cameron and 89 to Braden Maynard. But for now, let's get to the votes for this game. 3 votes Nick Dacos, 2 votes Josh Dacos and the 1 vote to Nick Vlossen. So now we get to the showdown in South Australia, of course. It was set up as Ken Hinkley's final showdown, but the power didn't show up in the second half as the Crows kicked away and won by a record high 98 points. 133 to the Crows, 35 to the Power. Now, there were a few injury concerns from this game. First of all, Michael Annie did hurt his hamstring in the third term. He was subbed out for the Crows. Lockie Jones had a corky. He was subbed out for the Power in the third term as well. And Jack Lukosius had an issue with his calf and he was ruled out in the final quarter. But getting to the game itself was a pretty good start from the Crows. They dominated most facets of the game, winning the ball at clearance, and the Power simply couldn't get their hands on the ball. And with the Crows kicking the first 3 goals of the contest, it felt pretty ominous early. However, the Power finished with 3 late goals, and with the Crows missing a few chances throughout the opening term, they only led by 5 points at the first break. Now, in the second term, the Power dominated field position, but just couldn't get it on the scoreboard. And when the Crows went down their end, they were lethal. After 4 goals to zip in the second quarter, the Crows led by a pretty comfortable 29 points at the main break. And when Adelaide kicked the first 3 goals of the third term, it felt at that point that the Power were all well and done. Now, they did kick 2 in response, with Adelaide finishing with the last 2 goals of the third term. They led by 50 heading into the final term. And when we went to the last quarter, the Crows went on a frenzy. They kicked 8 goals to zip and almost had the lead over 100 points by the end of the game. However, a 98-point win against your rivals must be a pretty good feeling going into the rest of the season. Taking top spot on the ladder, even if it's only briefly, a very good win from the Crows. While on the Power, pretty embarrassing. We've seen this a few times this year. My brother even told me post-game, this has been a running theme of the Power's season, that when they get down, they don't seem to fight back. They roll over, take what they can get, and there's no sort of fight back. So, interesting to see what they do with Ken Hinkley throughout the week. I don't really know what's next for the Power, but on the Crows' point of view, they're setting themselves up for a very big finish to the end of the season. They've got a couple of tough games coming up, but overall, they're going to be hard to beat going into the rest of the year, having a great second half of the season, currently sit on top of the ladder, and a team to watch at the end of the year. But for now, let's get to the statistics of this game, of course. On the multiple goal kickers for the Crows, Keys, Thilthorpe and Walker with the 3, Saligo and Berry with 2. For Port Adelaide, the only sole multiple goal kicker was McEntee with the 2. On the disposals for the Crows, Saligo 35, Peatling 26, 24 to Laird, 22 to Curtin, 21 to Keys. And for the Power, Butters with the 34, 25 to Wines, 24 to Farrell, 22 to Rosie and 18 to Georgiades. And finally on the AFL fantasy front for Adelaide, Saligo 121, Peatling 116, Neil Bullen with the 108, 106 to Dawson, 103 to O'Brien. And for Port Adelaide, Butters with the 115, 95 to Rosie, 91 to Sweet, 88 to Farrell and 79 to Willem Drew. But now let's get to the votes for this game. 3 votes Riley Thilthorpe, 2 votes Jake Saligo and the 1 vote to Jordan Dawson. So now we head to Marvel Stadium, North Melbourne up against Geelong. Set up as an interesting contest as the Cats have not had a very good record at Marvel Stadium. However, It was the Cats who dominated this game, running out winners in the end by 101 points. 49 to the Roos, 150 to Geelong. Now, can you believe at the start of this game, the Roos kicked 2 of the first 3 goals and actually had the lead nearly midway through the quarter. However, Geelong had so many opportunities in the opening term, moving 10 scoring shots to only 4, and at quarter time, they led by 16 points. But in this midway point of the second quarter, the Cats started to kick away. They had 11 goals to halftime to North Melbourne's only 3. However, I still don't think anyone would have seen a 100-point flogging coming. But with Jeremy Cameron's performance throughout the contest and kicking 22 goals with 40 scoring shots, the Cats ran out very comfortable winners in the end. Now, I know I'm glossing over a lot of this game, but there's not a lot to review here. The Cats got a nice win. The Roos, very disappointing performance. So overall, I think to take away from this game is obviously Jeremy Cameron's massive performance with the 11 goals. But the Kangaroos have so many problems at the moment. Is Alistair Clarkson the man? I honestly don't know right now. The fact that they got smashed by over 100 points again, we've seen this happen over the last few years. We thought maybe this was behind them, but we've seen a couple of thumpings that they've received in the last month or so, and the Kangas, I really don't know what to go from here. They don't have a first-round pick because they traded that away. They're going to be finishing below Richmond, a club who wasn't expected to win this season, and very disappointing performance once again. I don't know what's next for the Roos. Well done to Geelong, though. Got a nice win, percentage-boosting win, and keep their top 4 hopes alive. But for now, let's get to the statistics of this game. Of course, on the multiple goal kickers for the Roos, Zerha with 3, Curtis with 2. For Geelong, 11 goals to Cameron, 4 goals to Neil, 2 goals to Stengel. On the disposals, 4 Kangas, McKercher with 32, 31 to Parker, 27 to Sheasel, 24 to Simpkin and Powell. And for the Cats, 43 to Bailey Smith, 29 to Holmes, 25 to Atkins, 22 to Cameron, and 20 to Myers. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front, for North Melbourne, Sheasel and Powell with the 111, 106 to Parker, 104 to McKercher, 90 to Simpkin. And for Geelong, 157 to Jeremy Cameron, 132 to Bailey Smith, 118 to Holmes, 109 to Neil, and 100 to Tom Atkins. But for now, let's get to the votes. Pretty easy 3 votes here, of course, to Jezza Cameron, 2 votes to Bailey Smith, and the 1 vote to Max Holmes. So now we go to the Western Derby, of course, set up as an interesting one to see if the West Coast Eagles could fire a shot. However, wasn't really the case in the end, as Fremantle continued to consolidate their spot in the top 8 as they ran out pretty comfortable winners in the end by 49 points. Fremantle 126, the Eagles 77. Now there was one injury concern from this game, which was Harley Reid. He injured his ankle in the final term and struggled to make it from the field. Now, Andrew McWalter post-game was pretty sheepish on the injury to his young star, so we'll have to wait and see probably throughout the week too to determine if he will have another game throughout the rest of the year or if they will just keep him on ice. But getting to the game itself, and it was goal for the early stages of this contest, with the Eagles having the early advantage. However, with Fremantle kicking the last 4 goals of the opening term, they had a 28-point lead heading into quarter time. And when they kicked the 5th goal in a row in the early stages of the second term, the Dockers had a pretty comfortable margin over their crosstown rivals. However, they couldn't consolidate that lead on the scoreboard after 1 goal 6 in the second term, and the Eagles were able to kick straight down the other end. At halftime, they were able to reduce the lead, the West Coast Eagles, to just 22 points. And when they kicked the first goal of the second half, you could have been forgiven in thinking that Fremantle had a job on their hands. However, they finally were able to find the big sticks in the latter parts of the third term, and despite kicking another 6 behinds in the third quarter, they were able to find 3 goals and led at 3/4 time by 30 points. And in the final quarter, they were able to push away to a pretty comfortable lead in the end to put it beyond doubt. However, the West Coast Eagles did do well to kick 3 of the last 4 goals to put a little bit more respectability on the scoreboard. However, unfortunately for the West Coast, they couldn't get it done against their crosstown rivals and are destined for the wooden spoon by Fremantle. Have a lot of big games coming up to see if they can consolidate their spot fully in the top 8 and make finals. So well done to Fremantle, got a nice win, 50-pointer, 126 points on the scoreboard as well, which is really nice to see. And West Coast, I mean, we weren't expecting them to win this game. They did well to kick straight and keep the scoreboard relatively respectable, but in the end, they're going to be destined for the wooden spoon. So not much really to say there. But now let's move to the statistics of this game, of course. On the multiple goal kickers for the Dockers, Frederick with 4, 3 goals to Amos, Voss, and Young. For the Eagles, Cripps with the 2, along with Reid, Baker, and Kelly. On the disposals for Fremantle, Brayshaw 32, Bolton 25, 23 to Young and Murphy Reid, and 21 to Jordan Clark. And for the West Coast, Kelly 26, 24 to Baker, 21 to Marek and McCarthy, 17 to Cole. And finally on the AFL fantasy front, for Fremantle, Young 98, 97 to Jackson, 88 to Murphy Reid, 87 to Shea Bolton, and the 82 to Brayshaw. And for the West Coast, Baker 119, 82 to McCarthy, 78 to Kelly, 73 to Cripps, and 69 to Marek. But now let's get to the votes. 3 votes Hayden Young, 2 votes Murphy Reid, and the 1 vote to Andrew Brayshaw. Next up, early Saturday game was the Q Clash, the most important for the Gold Coast in their history, and they truly lived up to the hype, smashing their crosstown rivals, the bigger brother, by 66 points. The Gold Coast won 30, 64 to the Lions. Now, early in this game, Brisbane did hold an early advantage, but the Gold Coast were showing that they were well and truly up for the contest. And with the Suns holding firm in their back 50, along with kicking the last 4 goals of the opening term, they were able to take a pretty comfortable 16-point lead into quarter time. Now, it was goal for the majority of the second term before the Gold Coast made a nice little charge with 3 of the last 4 goals to take a very nice 33-point lead into half-time. And the Gold Coast threatened to blow out the margin early in the second half as they kicked the first 4 goals of it, and Brisbane were at breaking strain. Now, they did trade goals late, but at three-quarter time, the Gold Coast led by 58 points and pushed it out to nearly 70 in the early stages of the final term. Now, Brisbane did kick 3 goals in a row to reduce the margin to under 60 points, but the Gold Coast were lethal, having 5 goals in every single quarter and running out with a record high win in a Q Clash for the Gold Coast Suns. So well done to them. Last week, they were dismal against the Crows, but they really responded in good form, built a little bit more trust in the competition, I believe. And Brisbane, I think it was a bit of an off day for them. I still think they're going to be right up there at the end of the season when it comes to finals, but pretty disappointing from Brisbane in the end, so a few question marks will arise from this game. But for now, let's get to the statistics of this game. Of course, on the multiple goal kickers for the Suns, Long with 4, 3 goals to Humphrey, Ainsworth and Farah, 2 goals to King. For the Lions, sole multiple goal kicker was Cam Rayner with the 3. On the disposals for the Gold Coast, Rao with 37, 33 to Anderson, 32 to Fiorini and Jeffrey, 31 to Noble. And for Brisbane, Neil with the 36, 28 to McCluggage, 26 to Bailey, 25 to Ashcroft, and 22 to Dunkley. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front for the Suns, Rao with the 145, Fiorini with the 126, 114 to Humphrey, 111 to Davies, and 109 to Jeffrey. And for the Lions, 124 to Neil, 112 to Dunkley, 93 to Rayner, 91 to Bailey, and 90 to Will Ashcroft. But for now, let's get to the votes for this game. 3 votes Matt Rao, 2 votes Noah Anderson, and the 1 vote to Bailey Humphrey. So next up, we get to the Sydney Derby, the Battle of the Bridge. The Giants in the last 5 meetings have lost to the Sydney Swans, and in the first half looked like we were heading down that same trajectory. However, after the coach ripped the paint off the walls at halftime, the Giants came out with a massive response and blitzed the Swans in the second half to run out winners by 44 points. 102 to the Giants, 58 to the Swans. Now, there were quite a few injury concerns from this game. First of all, Hayden McLean got a massive hit in the opening seconds of this game and was ruled out with concussion in the early stages of the first term. Joel Hamling hurt his hamstring throughout the game and he was ruled out throughout the second half. Josh Kelly had some calf tightness. He was subbed out in the final term. And finally, Jack Buckley also had an injury with his lower leg and he had ice on it at the end of the game and was ruled out. But getting to the game itself, it was a pretty good start from GWS. They dominated the early territory battle and were able to kick the first goal of the game. However, they probably should have put a little bit more onto the scoreboard, and it didn't take long for the Swans to take control. Sydney kicked the next 3 goals, and heading into the first break, Sydney led by 15 points. And in the second quarter, the pressure from the visitors lifted even more. The Giants couldn't get the ball outside their defensive half, and the mids of the Swans were well and truly on top. Sydney kicked the first 3 goals of the second term, and in the latter parts of the first half, they held a game-high 35-point lead. However, a late Giants goal saw the margin reduced to 28 points in the major break. Now, the Giants needed something to spark them in the second half, and it seemed that Adam Kingsley's spray at the main break got his team well and truly up and about, as they came out with a mission in the third term. The home side absolutely trounced Sydney in the third quarter. They dominated every facet of the game and overturned a 28-point halftime deficit into a 23-point lead heading into the final term. And the Giants simply didn't let up in that final quarter. They put the Swans to the sword, and in the end, this game was a tale of 2 halves. But it was the Giants who taught Big Brother a lesson as they ended their crosstown rivals season, as well as keeping their top 4 aspirations alive. So well done to the Giants. It was a pretty poor first half, but they well and truly responded in that second half. Finally broke their Sydney Derby drought, so well done to them in Sydney. Probably not the worst thing in the world that they did lose today. They can finally stop trying to keep those finals hopes somewhat alive, and they can rest a couple of players for the rest of the season, maybe take some players out, give them their off-season early, give them a surgery if they need it, and look for aspiration to next year. I'd personally say Tom Papley needs to probably sit out the rest of the year. He looks a little bit beaten up, a little bit underdone. I don't know if he's overweight, like Toby Green said, but that was great theatre, I'd have to say. Tom McCartan, even though he may well be okay with concussion, I would really just give him the rest of the year off, let him recover fully, and then come back bigger and better next year. And if there's any other niggles for any other Swans players, I'd say probably give them the rest of the year off and look towards a 2026 resurgence. But Giants, they could be anywhere this year. Massive performance from them. But for now, let's get to the statistics of this game. Of course, on the multiple goal kickers for the Giants, Stringer and Cabin with 3, Hogan and Bedford with 2. Swans' only multiple goal kicker was Will Hayward with the 3. On the disposals for GWS, Whitfield 27, Angwin 25, Himmelberg 23, Callahan 21, and Cornelio with the 19. And for Sydney, Goulden 32, Lloyd 25, 24 to Grundy, 22 to Mills and Heaney. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front, for the Giants, Whitfield 109, Himmelberg 107, Callahan 95, 89 to Angwin, 79 to Taylor. And for the Swans, Grundy 130, Lloyd 99, 98 to Goulden, 94 to Mills and Heaney. But now let's get to the votes in this game. 3 votes Finn Callahan, 2 votes Harry Himmelberg, and the 1 vote to Lockie Whitfield. Finn Callahan, what a performance, especially in that third term. Really changed the game from mine. Led from the front. Jordan did go to him from start to finish, and after a first half where Callahan was pretty good, he absolutely blitzed the Swans in the third quarter. 8 disposals, 5 scorer involvements, kicked a goal, and I think not even just his third quarter, but his second half was absolutely amazing. So well done to Callahan. Truly led from the front and won the Brett Kirk medal, which was deserving. Harry Himmelberg liked his role tonight. Played a little bit on the wing, bit of half-back, 4 intercept marks, 23 disposals, 11 marks in total. Was very good down there. And Lockie Whitfield was a great user off that half-back line, as he always has been. 27 disposals, 21 of them being kicks and 8 marks. Love to see it. Next up, we head to Marvel Stadium, the other Friday night contest. And this game is always going to be set up as a Bulldogs win. The question was how much, and in the end, they got a very nice percentage booster, even though they didn't really need it, the Bulldogs. They ran out winners in the end by 93 points, 50 to the Bombers, 143 to the Dogs. Now, there were a couple of injury concerns from this game. First of all, Jordan Ridley, who came off in the second term with an issue to his hamstring, and he was subbed out soon after. And Tom Liberatore had an issue with his leg in the early stages of the third term. Came off for an assessment, but did return to the field for a little bit. However, he was subbed out in the final term. I think it was mainly precautionary, but something to keep an eye on throughout the week. But with this game, it had all the hallmarks of a 100-point thumping, and if anything, you have to give credit to Essendon as they kept that margin under that threshold. However, to say this game was a spectacle would absolutely be a 100% lie. There was not a lot to really be taken away from this game for either side. The key forwards of the Dogs banked up on some goals. The midfielders had a field day, and I think if Essendon could forfeit the rest of their season, I honestly think they would consider it right now. With injuries continuing to mount, players who are getting games who don't really deserve it, and being uncompetitive, Essendon's season goes from bad to worse, and I think the Bombers would want their season over as soon as possible. So I'm really not going to cover a lot of this game. I mean, I don't think there's much to review about it. They got thumped. The Bulldogs probably took their foot off the gas, if I'm being honest. They could have absolutely put the Dons to the sword. Credit to them, they didn't get smashed by over 100, but that's pretty much the only thing you can take away from this game. The Dogs, they've got more fish to fry in the next couple of weeks if they want to make finals. Let's move to the statistics of this game, of course. Multiple goal kickers, first of all, for the Dons, Wright and McMahon with the 2. For the Dogs, Norton 7, Darcy 6, 3 to West, 2 to Bontempelli and Richards. On the disposals, for Essendon, Merritt with 30, Shield 29, 27 to Durham, 26 to Roberts, 23 to Redmond. For the Dogs, Bontempelli 35, Williams 26, 24 to Richards and Johannesson, 23 to Bramble. And finally on the AFL fantasy front, for the Bombers, 115 to Merritt, 98 to Shield, 92 to Redmond, 84 to Durham, 83 to Roberts. And for the Dogs, Bontempelli 146, 117 to Darcy, 111 to Norton, 101 to Kennedy and English. But for now, let's get to the votes for this game. My brother was watching this one. He has given the votes to 3 votes Sam Darcy, 2 votes Marcus Bontempelli, and 1 vote to Aaron Norton. Now, he's quickly just wanted to clarify why Aaron Norton is got the 1 vote and not higher. Even though he did get 7, he did say that he got 4 of those goals from free kicks. So that's why he has given Aaron Norton the 1, not any higher than that. So finally, we get to the first game of the round. The Hawks up against the Blues. It was pretty much the first quarter blitz from Hawthorn, which really split the difference. The Blues stayed with them for the majority of the contest, but in the end, the Hawks ran out winners by 24 points. points, 85 to Hawthorn, 61 to the Blues. Now, it was an amazing start for Hawthorn, like I just mentioned. The home side kicked the first 4 goals to give themselves a nice handy break. One thing that was great to see from Hawthorn early was their immense pressure. They were ruthless for the entirety of the opening term, and after kicking 6 goals to 1 at quarter time, Hawthorn led by 29 points. And they continued on early in the second term. The brown and gold got the first 2 goals of the quarter, and at that point the game fell dead and buried before the halftime siren. However, Carlton were able to string a couple of goals together heading into the major break as they reduced the halftime margin to just 30 points. But again, Hawthorn would start to kick away again. They kicked 3 of the first 4 goals of the second half and put the game beyond doubt. Now, credit to the Blues as they didn't let the second half blow away too much. In fact, they actually won it. But unfortunately for Carlton, they couldn't get it done for their superstar running defender in Sam Docherty. And in his final game, he sadly ends his career on a loss. But what a true champion of the football club. And he leaves with a great legacy for the Blues. And hopefully his health and everything goes well into the future. Sam Docherty, what a champion of the game. Really unfortunate that they couldn't get it done for him. But Hawthorn, they're going to have a couple of big games coming up. They have a pretty tough run home, but I think they've got enough wins to lock off that top 8 spot. But if they can get a couple of wins going into finals, maybe they can do something. However, I'm still a bit hesitant to say that they're going to be somewhat of a contender this year. I still think they've got some flaws. So we'll just have to wait and see how Hawthorn go for the rest of the season. But the Blues now, even though I think they had a 0.2% chance of finals, that was dashed tonight. But for now, let's move to the statistics of this game, of course. On the multiple goal kickers for the Hawks, Gunston with 3, 2 to Deere, Lewis and Watson. For the Blues, 2 goals to Curnow and White. On the disposals for Hawthorn, Moore with a 27, 25 to Sicily and Impey, 22 to Ward and Ambrosio. And for Carlton, Hewitt with a 25, 21 to Akers, 20 to Hollands, 19 to Chera and O'Farrell. And finally on the AFL fantasy front, for the Hawks, 110 to Sicily, 99 to Moore and Impey, 95 to Nash, 86 to Gunston. And for the Blues, Hewitt with a 116, O'Farrell with a 103, 88 to Hollands, 85 to Chera and 83 to Adam Sard. But for now, let's get to the votes for this game. My brother, again, has given the votes. He has gone with 3 votes, James Sicily, 2 votes, Jarman Impey, and the 1 vote to Jack Gunston. But guys, thanks for watching this episode of the review. I hope you did enjoy it. And if you want to listen to the full episode, then make sure to go check us out on Spotify, as you can listen to the full episode there the morning after the round finishes. But that is all from me, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy it. But for now, we'll catch you all in the next one.